This podcast is made possible by funding from True Patriot Love Foundation.
The fact that you're used to being resilient and dealing with some adversity, having your spouse or partner leave for a number of months or having to change completely the town that you live in is hard, and that brings a lot of growth and skill.
The military lifestyle is all-encompassing.
It's difficult but rewarding.
Dynamic. Very, very dynamic.
Unpredictable.
You are in the Canadian Armed Forces or a family member connected to the military. You know the lifestyle can be a challenge.
The military lifestyle is always changing.
In this podcast, we explore the world of deployments, postings, and transitions. This is the military lifestyle. Here's your host, John Shaboon.
Military families have to recreate community with every posting. For some military spouses or partners, that could mean looking for work at a new place and rebuilding from scratch. Kim Dillon is the Community Relations Coordinator at WorkLink, an employment center with locations in Langford and Sooke here in Greater Victoria. So yes, today we're talking about starting over again in terms of employment. If you're new to Greater Victoria or about to leave for something new, or maybe if you're somewhere else in the world listening as a military family member, Kim Dillon from WorkLink's here to talk about this with us. Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, thank you, John.
So how do you address having lots of shorter term jobs? I'm thinking like 2 to 3 years or gaps in resumes. How do you overcome that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think the first thing to think about is that you don't necessarily have to tell an employer that your spouse or your partner is in the military. That's actually illegal for them to even ask about your marital status. It might be evident by way of your resume, like you're saying, that there may be some pretty obvious transitions that you've made frequently. But I also think that it's important to remember that increasingly, most industries are seeing higher turnover because technology is advancing so quickly that it's really common for people, especially in the tech industry, for instance, to stay at a job for a year and then move on. So I don't think it's as taboo anymore. However, I do think that it's important to address it head on and sort of deal with the objection before it's even voiced. So if you think, okay, this employer is going to kind of balk or shy away from my application because they're just going to think that I'm going to be posted again in another couple of years, talk to that, speak to that and say, I do have some transitions that are a possibility in the future, but because of the transitions I've gone through in the first part of my life, I can tell you that I am resilient and nimble and adaptable, and I will work as hard as I can for you to grow and change with your business, just like you need everybody to.
So do you have to approach a resume or cover letter differently? Do you put it in your cover letter, not even do it in your resume?
I think that you can put it in your cover letter. You don't have to spell it out in terms of, I'm a military spouse and we're going to be posted to Trenton next year, right? I think that you can just speak to the fact that your life experience has given you those skills and you're happy to give those to your employer so that they can grow their business.
And if you're an out-of-towner, is it okay to apply for work wherever you're going to end up? Will employers be cool with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, at our WorkBC Center in Colwood, we have a room specifically set up so that people can have interviews via Skype or virtually, because our world is getting really small, right? With the advance of technology again. So it's not uncommon for an employer to hire people sort of sight unseen through a virtual interview. But make sure that when you're doing that, your LinkedIn account and profile look excellent and that you've done your work to network within the community online.
Now, I'm thinking of like with employers, do they have an unconscious bias against hiring someone that they might perceive as leaving in a few years?
I think that still does exist a little bit. Luckily, there are some employers who have actually committed to valuing what a military spouse brings to the table. BMO, Bank of Montreal, Garda World, Commissionaires, Bayshore Healthcare. There's a number of them that actually have signed on with the Military Spousal Network, which is an initiative brought on by the Canadian government to help people in this situation. So yeah, there are some employers that might have a bias, but there are also employers that recognize the incredible resiliency that they get from those types of employees.
But we still know it's a challenge. I know I read in a few online studies from the United States talking about unemployment rates of military spouses and estimates between 18 to 24%. So when it comes to something like references, what do you do with that?
Yeah, so I think it's important first off to keep in touch with your references. And luckily, because of social media now, it's easier to keep in touch with references. If you're at all concerned about what your reference might say about you, it's important that you grab a friend or go to an employment center like a WorkBC center and ask somebody to call your reference for you to see what they're going to say, or even just ask the reference yourself. What would you say about me if you were giving a reference? And then you know what they're going to say. As far as using references when you haven't, like you say, had really long-term employment, connect with other people in your community that could be a reference for you. Maybe you've volunteered or maybe you've been on a project. Those things are still really valuable. In the past, it might have been valued that you stay at one employer for 30 years, but the world is changing. Less and less, I think it's an issue now. Yeah.
And do employers value a reference that might be on the other side of the country?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that shows that you're worldly and you have the ability to think outside the box, right? You don't necessarily want to just have experience from your own little tiny community. You need some creativity, and to be nimble, you need to have had some adversity in your life and to have some different perspectives.
With references, is there a shelf life to them? Like, do they expire after like a certain number of years?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. You're right. I think
freshness. You need a fresh reference. You can't go with
fresh
a
is better.
Stale reference.
Yeah, fresh is always better, just like food.
Okay.
But I do think that there's something to be said for a reference that's 5 years old or even 10 years old, if they can really speak volumes to the skills that are important to the current employer that you're applying with. So it might be that your last reference, your most recent reference, can speak to certain skills that maybe aren't as relevant to the job that you're applying for. Do give that reference for sure because it's recent, but also look back on those older references, reach out to them and use them because they might be more relevant.
So if you're going to have to start over again, networking must be key. Usually when I think of networking, there's audible groan, it's like, oh, networking.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Yay. Yay, networking. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that we all have that a little bit, right? The main thing to remember is that, we can all sit in our little hovel at home on the computer and network through LinkedIn or Facebook or apply for 100 different positions a day. But the thing that's actually going to get you hired is being belly to belly with an employer or community member. And that means getting out there and asking for information interviews. Because if you're in a new town or if you're about to move to a new town, you don't have a network of family and friends and peers in that town yet. So it's just important to actually ask for an information interview. And luckily, we all love to talk about ourselves, right? And especially business owners or managers, they're typically quite proud of what they've built. And so if you call them up or go into the office and say, I'd love to work for you, or I'd love to work for your industry one day. Is there a chance you could speak with me for a few minutes and I could learn more about your company or your industry? 99% of the time, they'll say yes. And so then you make sure that you ask for an interview in person. You go, make sure that you stick to the time frame that you've committed to so that you don't take too much of their time. But then spend 15 minutes with them and ask them what it's like to work in that industry or in that company. Ask them the skills that they're looking for and the experiences they're looking for. This is your chance to ask them all of that information that you can use down the road. It also is a huge, huge opportunity for you to become a known entity to them, so that when they are eventually going to hire and they put out a posting, you apply and they go, oh, right, John, I remember that guy. Actually, he was pretty decent. I think that we will give him an interview.
I am pretty decent.
You
Thank
are.
you.
So it makes it less risky for that employer to hire you, and it gives you a huge edge over other people.
So informational interviews are great. Any other tips you have when it comes to networking?
it is exhausting looking for work. It really is a full-time job. But to remember that you kind of need to be on. You know, if somebody cuts you off in traffic, maybe don't finger them because
You never know.
You
That
just
could be
never
your
know.
next boss, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
you really, yeah. So making sure that you're conducting yourself in a professional way throughout your day. When you take your kids to the pool and they're, you know, kind of acting out, you're not going to fly off the handle in front of everybody as much as you want to. Just making sure that you're really thinking about your image in the community.
Yes. And if you participate in social media, which a lot of people do, you almost have to do it. You have to, I don't know, hire a person to manage yourself, or you got to do it yourself, but you got to screen basically some of your thoughts. You got to, before you hit send on that tweet or that posting.
Absolutely. When you're job seeking, you are the product and you want to sell that product. And you would never, when selling a product, speak in a derogatory way about that product. So don't put yourself down by making yourself look like a jerk on social media. The other really interesting statistic is that 95% roughly of recruiters or employers will check a person's social media profiles before hiring them. 75% of those employers will do that before they even meet the person. So when they're checking through their stack of resumes, and again, on average, about 100 resumes per position that they'll get, when they're trying to weed through those, they're going to go onto Facebook or LinkedIn and look. You know, if there's a humongous flag for them, they'll just go on to the next resume.
Basically, if you have a profile picture on your Facebook account, you should be doing some humanitarian work or something, you know.
Hugging a puppy, perhaps.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can all do crazy things and have our cool, crazy lives. But if you're going to do that and want to be a part of that online, perhaps use a pseudonym for your Facebook account, and then definitely have a LinkedIn account that provides a really professional image of yourself with your actual name so that employers, when they do find you, they find the right profile.
And look at your privacy settings.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that can be really hard because they're constantly changing how to set those settings. So you have to go in and really dig.
Yes, that's really, really important. The nice thing about being on LinkedIn is that there's a privacy setting that will make it so that your current employer doesn't usually see that you're networking or that you're putting yourself out there looking for work. It doesn't always work, but at least it filters through most of those searches your current employer might do.
What are a few transferable skills that military-connected family members can highlight?
There's a huge number of them. I think just the fact that you're used to being resilient and dealing with some adversity, you know, having your spouse or partner leave for a number of months or having to change completely the town that you live in is hard. And that brings a lot of growth and skill. If you can highlight how resilient you are and how hardworking you are, that's huge. The other thing that's really important to highlight is your ability to develop relationships quickly, because again, robots can't do those things. So we are entering a highly automated age in the workforce, but those are the things that robots will never be able to do, and they'll always be in demand.
Yeah, those are a lot of great points of different skills. What other things that people can draw upon? And like, for example, if they're a parent or something, and I kind of wonder about all this stuff, you know, is you say that employers might value these skills of being a military family member or being a parent or something like that, but they will actually value those skills. Is that correct? Or some or most? Or
I think it's important to spell it out for people though, and to provide some social stories. So in your cover letter or when you're speaking to an employer, it's important to say to them, you know, I've become really resilient. For instance, when we moved from Halifax to Victoria, I had to create a whole new social network for myself and my children. And I was able to connect with XYZ volunteer organization. And I got really involved with the PAC at my children's school. And from that, I developed even more hard skills, such as XYZ. so that you really spell it out for people and they can start to imagine, yeah, this person does have skills I can use in my business. The other thing that I think is really important to highlight for employers is that just because you've been at home with children or perhaps you've been caring for another family member doesn't mean you haven't been working. Employers usually like to see what's called a chronological resume. They like to see that you've worked here from this time period to this time period, and before that you worked here from this time period to this time period, and so on and so on. If you had 10 years or 15 years where you weren't working outside the home, write down in there, family caregiver, and list the things that you did. Because I think more and more we as a society need to value the lived experience of family caregivers and not just those experiences that we get on the job outside of the home.
So how can you market your skills as a military family member? Give me a few tools. You spoke about LinkedIn as one thing, but what else would you recommend?
I think it's really important, again, to network in your community, reaching out to your WorkBC center or your employment center, wherever that is in the community or in the country, to meet with people in person and gain those skills in interviewing and conducting information interviews is really, really helpful. Making sure that your LinkedIn account is fully populated is really important.
When you say fully populated, what are some things you can do with your LinkedIn account to kind of beyond the basics of I worked here from this time to that time?
Yeah. So one thing that's really easy is that, like you're saying, during the experience section of your profile, it'll say, I worked at Acme Company from 1999 to 2003. Well, underneath that, make sure that you write a description about what you did at Acme, because in that description, you'll be able to use keywords. You'll be able to describe the specific skills and experiences, the specific software you might have used, and all of those words heighten the computer's search ability to find you so that when an employer goes online and they are searching for people who know SharePoint, for instance, your profile will come up if it says that you used SharePoint at Acme Company in 2003. If you don't put those specific skills down, the employers won't see you in their search.
So employers actually do that nowadays? Maybe I'm just out of the loop so much that I don't know. I've been working here too long, I guess. I'm sheltered. And so people will actually do little keyword searches for specific skills.
Yeah, more and more people are using LinkedIn, especially for those online searches, and even using Indeed and other online platforms to find employees. So those keywords are your friend. Those are the ones that are going to get you found. Even if the employer doesn't see those keywords through a search, having those parts of your LinkedIn account populated means that you're now going to have an expert level profile. That's what LinkedIn would call it, an expert level profile, if everything is filled in. And then your posts are more likely to come up. So your credibility is then heightened. And again, the more you post or comment or even like other people's posts on LinkedIn, then your level of credibility goes up and your visibility on LinkedIn goes up. You can even publish a short article. All of us now can be bloggers and all of us now are experts. So write an article about what you know and publish it on LinkedIn. And that is huge. People then see you for this skilled expert in your field rather than just somebody who likes a post of somebody else's.
A recommendation to military families would be to contact their local employment agency in their area. In here in the Victoria area in the West Shore, it's WorkLink. And yeah, I know you said you've worked here for almost close to 20 years now. And geez, there must have been like quite a bit of change in that 20 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Although, to be honest with you, some things never change. Information interviews, getting belly to belly with employers, developing those relationships are key.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would recommend for people?
I think you hit the nail on the head, John, in saying that, this is all very overwhelming and it's a lot of information to take in sometimes, but just go and reach out to the resources that are available to you, whether it's online through the military spousal employment network or going into an employment center like a WorkBC center and getting support there. There are so many free services and even funding to go back to school or have a wage subsidy that can give you that edge and give you the confidence that you need to go out there and succeed.
And if you hate networking, there are some groups that I've set up dedicated to networking. So you don't have to worry about networking cold calling. You can network with a bunch of people who also want to network. So
that's right. Yeah. There's Toastmasters. There's tons of meetup groups, even just networking at a WorkBC center. And remember that you can start safe first. So begin by networking to do with a hobby that you might have because it's pretty low stakes, and then move on to maybe a networking group like a Chamber of Commerce where you're going to be dealing with people in the business realm.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention? Did we cover it all? This is pretty good?
I think it's the tip of the iceberg.
Tip of the iceberg.
People can come on into a center and get lots of support and find out more.
All right. Thank you for your time, Kim.
Thanks, John, for having me.
Information for the Military Spousal Employment Network can be found at msen.vfairs.com. It's a bit of a mouthful, so you might just want to Google that. Also, connect with your closest military family resource center to see what they offer or if there's an employment center that can assist you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Military Lifestyle. To learn more about this episode and to check out our other resources like the deployment app, go to esquimalt.mfrc.com. A special thanks to True Patriot Love Foundation for funding Season 1 of this podcast, and to Organized Sound Productions for bringing our idea to life. Please share this podcast with your military family or with someone living the lifestyle. Subscribe to The Military Lifestyle on your favorite podcast app. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you for listening.